Welcome back to our MongoDB lecture. This is part 3. At the end of the last one, we had defined a model, a schema, and written our web service to do a post to the food database and add a collection called foods. So you'll see that we added 2 records to it, cottage cheese and Cheerios, and we defined different fields in those since we only had 1 required field, and you'll see that it generated an ID and a version for each. So now we're going to work on querying some data. So we already have our food model. We don't need to add anything to this. And we're going to go into our food controller, and we're going to say that we're making a function called getFood by ID. And that's only going to take 1 parameter, and you guessed it, it's ID. And this is going to be pretty simple, and we're just going to say return food model, which we require pulled in already, dot find by ID. And then you will pass that in. And that is it here. The last part that we're going to do is going to be where we actually call this logic in the route. So now we're going to jump over to our food route, and we're going to do a get by ID. And this is going to have 1 parameter of ID. So colon ID specifies that. So now we need to grab the URL param, let ID equals rec.params. Make sure that's params, not param. Talking to you, JJ. And now we are just going to call food controller, and then get. What did I not do? I didn't module.export this. IntelliSense saves the day. Let's try this one more time. Now we have get food by ID. And we're going to pass in the ID parameter. And then to execute this, so right now we just have the function reference here. To execute this, we need to say dot then, and that will give us back our food. And this is a function, so with 1 parameter of the food object, and we're going to say rest.json food. And then suppose that something goes wrong with this call, we're going to go ahead and catch our error. And then we're going to say rest.status, say that's a bad response, and say rest.json, and just print out the error that Mongo gave us. So let's fire this up and give it a try. So the first thing that I need to do here is go into mLab and steal the ID of one of these items. Now I'm going to open up Postman, go to localhost 5000/foods, and then we'll give it an ID. And I need to change this from a post to a get, and we'll try making the call. And it is telling us that there is a cast error. So now I am going to pull up the code here. and I look at my query, and I see that when I copied the value, it appended a double quote to the end of it. So that's happened to me twice now in demonstration, so be very careful when you copy that from mLab. So now we gathered all of our values. Now let's see what happens when we give it some kind of invalid data. So it looks like, given the situation where it does not find it, that it would be useful to write in your own 404 not found, because the errors that Mongo gives back aren't always useful. So keep that in mind as you're doing your to-do API project. So now we've done a get food by ID. Now we're just going to do a get food, or get all the foods. So this is going to be very similar. Get all foods. I'll just say get foods, plural. And this is going to take no parameters. We're going to say return food model dot find, and then it's going to want the criterion here, and we're just going to say we don't have any criteria. So that should return all of the records. And last thing that we need to do is module.exports that. Now I'm going to make a new get, and that's just going to be at the root of this URI. So /foods. And we'll say food controller dot get foods. And then we're going to say dot then. So this should return all of the foods in our database. So it should be an array of JSON objects or foods. And we'll say rest.json foods. Then we need our catch, and we'll throw an error. That needs to be dot catch, not catch. And then rest.status 400 and rest.json error. There should be less room for errors in this call since we're not passing in any parameters ourselves to it. So now let's try running this again. And we'll just make it /foods. And now we've got both of our records in the database with all their fields. Now let's suppose that we don't want all of the values in here. And there are ways of doing this, and it's called projecting. So we are going to go to our food controller, and I am going to define a second parameter that goes after your criteria, and this is called the projection. And there's two ways of doing this. You can exclude this, or you can include this. So this is just going to be a JSON item. And I'm going to pick some fields here. So you can either do inclusions or exclusions, not both. And I'm going to say that I do not want to include the version. So you can either say 0 or false to exclude here. So then I will say that I want the projection as a second parameter. So this will include all fields except for version. Now let's try restarting this and make this API call one more time. So you'll see now includes all of the fields except for version. Now let's try doing something very similar on our get individual food by ID. But instead of excluding, we're going to make this inclusion. So something better that could be done, instead of saying projection, you could say const inclusion projection. That way the reader of this understands more of what's going on. And we're going to say that we want ID, true, and that we want category, true, and name, true. And then we'll plug in this as the second parameter again, where the projection goes. And we will restart this. And I'm going to go back into a previous API call made where I already had an ID. I'm going to send it. And now you'll see that I only included the fields that we put in our inclusion projection. ID, category, and name. Now let's see what happens if we try to put an exclusion in here. And prettier formatted it. So now MongoDB came back and gave us an error saying that projection cannot have a mix of inclusion and exclusion. So like I was saying earlier, let's only do inclusions or exclusions, whatever is easier for the end user to read. So that is it for our querying MongoDB exercise. Thank you.